for the great city of Opa-locka. Continue to give us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Do those things which are pleasing in your sight. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comments, public comment. You open the public comments is open. Public comments is open. Public comments is closed. Madam Manager, I'll turn it over to you now for the discussion items.
I think we need it on so that they can hear you. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Try it now. There we go. All right, we have some volume now. Thank you. I'm going to turn it a little bit. So, good evening. My name is Diane Quigley. I am the project manager for Stantec on this project, and I'm working closely with Adelina, your project manager on this, on the Opa-locka vulnerability assessment. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what the project entails, our outcomes, why we're here tonight, and then take your questions and answers on anything. So, do you have the presentation up? There. Nope, that's not my presentation. So, there we go. There we go. Thank you, Chris, so much. I appreciate it. So, as we were brought on to do this vulnerability assessment for you all, which is funded by the Resilient Florida program at FDEP, of which I was the first director of that program and worked there at DEP for a while. So I'm now with Stantec, but anyway, I just want to let you know. So the purpose of a vulnerability assessment, what is a vulnerability assessment? It is the data and analysis where we look at what parts of the city are prone to flooding. And I think after this week, we kind of already know existing where the flooding is. But we also have to look at the future. We look out to 2050 and 2080. This is a requirement of statute. They're encouraging all communities to do these vulnerability assessments. And what this does is kind of set you up for future funding with DEP and federal agencies to do more to pursue capital funding for projects and such in your community. So it does identify what's flooding now and in the future, and it looks at the depth of flooding, and it also looks at what critical assets are the most prone and the most vulnerable to that flooding. It helps you to prioritize your needs under which assets are. And I'll explain a little bit more what those assets are. So the goals is to determine the flood prone areas, establish your critical needs and your priorities in your community, all in accordance with the statute, and to put you in a position to receive future federal and state funds to adapt your infrastructure to be more flood resistant and flood prone in the future and make a more resilient community over time. It helps to prepare the city for future storms. It helps your businesses if you start to build these adaptation and start adapting your infrastructure. It helps the businesses recover faster. It reduces their loss of income and viability during these storm events. It protects the public health. It keeps them out of flood-prone areas and safer. And it helps you with your flood insurance costs through your CRS program, Community Rating System CRS program. Whereas if you do these studies and you identify these areas It coordinates with your local mitigation strategy, and it all goes into your firm into the National Flood Insurance Program. So, oh, sorry, turns fast. Sorry, a little slow. So, again, as we mentioned, this vulnerability assessment will be feeding into your local mitigation strategy, which is used to identify more critical hazard-prone assets and facilities within your community, and set you up for federal funding, hazard mitigation funds, as well as it sets you up for more resilient Florida, more capital type projects, or what we call implementation projects under Resilient Florida. These are the steps within the study, and we are at number 3 right now, public presentation and outreach. We did have a kickoff meeting with Ms. Gross, and we did prepare the first technical memorandum and inquiring background data, which is a lot of what you see around here, these maps, and we want to get your input on today. And then we'll have this exposure analysis that's really that's projecting the rainfall, projecting sea level rise, and overlaying that on your elevation data and all this stuff, and then determining what areas are going to be flooded in the future as well. So we're doing this all, like I said, consistent with the Florida statutes, the Resilient Florida program. They do regulate a lot of this. So what assets are we looking at? We're looking at city-owned assets, and they're defined in these categories: the natural, cultural, historical, critical infrastructure, transportation, critical community, and emergency facilities. These are defined in statute as to what assets we have to do. We do have some leeway to add some things in there if it's really important to the city that we want us to take a look at it. And a lot of in your areas, a lot of these historic buildings, we have a lot of historic resources. And so we want to look at and consider all of those. It's important to you and your community. And but we want you to consider that you might want to adapt in the future and get some funding for those facilities. So it does not, and we have to manage the expectations a lot of time with the public, it does not look at privately owned properties. The state does have some guidance and some some state funds for homeowners for Elevate Florida. They also cover a lot of the wind damage. They have some funds there. And then they also have some assistance for small businesses, some guidance on how to deal with storms and recoup faster. And then of course you also have some funding with the SBA and other type local funding programs. Let's see, try again. Okay, so these are the assets that we've collected so far, and I'm not going to go through a detail on these maps. We do have larger maps here, and you have the maps in your handout in the presentation. And what we're trying to do is capture all of the critical assets as defined in statute and make sure we're not missing anything. So any feedback we get from you and the public, if there's something that you don't think we put in there that we need to put in there, again, consider this is either locally, state, or federally owned. And even if it's state and federally owned, all we would do is tell them, hey, it's a potentially flooded asset and they have to deal with it. We're only focused on your assets when we start to prioritize future adaptation and resilience strategies and projects. So we have critical community, emergency facilities, natural, historic, and cultural resources here on a map. And then we have transportation and others here. And then we'd like to get comments on anything from anybody, like I said, the public and you all, and let us know anything that we're missing on those. So as I mentioned, we're doing an assessment, an exposure analysis, what they call a model that determines flooding present in the year 2050 was what we call mid-century, and 2080. These timeframes are also determined in statute. We are required to look at these timeframes. So what this does is if you know something is potentially going to fund in 2050, you can get the funds now to make that more resilient, to flood proof it, to elevate it, to move it, to, do some flood protection around it, whatever you need to do to help your community. So again, we've seen a lot of local flooding issues. We've been working with Carlos and Adelina to identify some of the existing areas. And if you have more that you would like to tell us what you know floods right now and you think is important, please do, because we want to include this in that list of priorities. Those are your immediate needs as well as your future needs that will help you determine. So step one, as what we're doing now, is collecting the publicly owned critical assets. Step 2 is determine the flood risk of all these assets now and in the future. Identify the ones that are now exposed to floods and those that will be flooding in the future, that based on the data and analysis that we do, and determine those. And then determine target areas, what we call focus areas or adaptation areas. They're special areas within the community that you want to focus on and make a priority. And then what we do is we look at the sensitivity of all the assets. We consider how prone they are, how sensitive they are to flooding. Like we know maybe a lift station is more prone to flooding. And if that floods and breaks down, that affects more of the community than just maybe a road or an intersection flooding or some other parks flooding. We know those will recede quickly, but which ones affect the community the most and have the most community impact? Those are probably going to be your higher priorities. And step 5, we develop a plan for you. And we look at adaptation strategies, what you might want to do. It's just some conceptual. We only go to the conceptual level. We don't do design at this point, but we determine some of the strategies and some potential costs. And these become your list of projects that you want to promote, and they become your higher priorities for funding in the future. These are some of the stormwater projects we've been recommending in a lot of these. A lot of these are more nature-based solutions, a combination of what we call gray and green infrastructure. The gray is the concrete. The green is the more nature-based solutions. And these tend to get funded a lot quicker. In the statutes, nature-based solutions, greens infrastructures get a higher, more points when they're looking and analyzing the funding for the upcoming year, looking at the projects to fund. So these are just some ideas. So this is the timeline, what we're doing. June through October, we'll be doing the exposure and sensitivity analysis. We'll have another public workshop in the fall to present the results of this model that we've done and look at the higher priorities and help you determine which are the priorities and which ones you want to fully develop into maybe some project concepts or strategies that you might want to do. Some of it could be education. Doesn't have to be a hard project. It could be like education to the community about flooding and what to do, and education to the businesses and notices and things like that. It doesn't always have to be a stormwater project or a lift station elevation or relocation or anything like that. So all depends on what you want to see. And we'll be wrapping this up by April of next year. So all of this, and develop a plan. So what are we asking of you in the public today? Help us identify those spots that we talked about that are flooding now. And then help us make sure that we are including all the public facilities that are important to you, and make sure they get on the list and they get included. Because I can tell you right now, if they get on this list, it goes up to the state. The state takes all these little vulnerability assessments all the communities are doing, and they put them into one big statewide vulnerability assessment. And all future funding for resilience projects, they have to be identified in that statewide VA. That's what the statute says. So we want to make sure that if they're important, they get on that list and they get included and get sent up to the state. So we are asking for comments today. We're asking, you can mark the board, you can tell us. I'm sure you're going to tell me what you think. And then also we have comment cards for the public to fill out, what they think is important, what they want to do. We have them on the back table here. If anybody wants to, we have them in Spanish, Creole, and English as well. So we'll be collecting those, and all that information will be brought into the report. And that leads and helps you to prioritize these projects. We got to consider the public comments and feedback as well. So I think that's it. Not turning over. There we go. Thank you. So you know who to talk to internally.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Quigley. Let me open up to my colleagues first for any comments or questions they may have before I ask mine.
Thank you.
Colleagues,
Thank you.
Mr. Irvin.
So in your what do you call it? Sorry.
Vulnerability assessment?
The assessment.
You can go VA for
the
sure.
assessment.
Yeah.
So in your assessment, you tell us what causes the flooding and how we should and what to do to correct it. as well?
Yes, we'll help you identify some solutions, some general conceptual ideas and thoughts and what you might want to do. And then you guys can, at a later stage, take that and fully develop that into a project, do design, if you need permitting or anything like that, and you can apply for more funds to fund that project. Yes.
Okay. I didn't
Mhm.
look at I looked through here briefly. I
Mhm.
didn't look at your posters.
Mhm.
One of the areas, I see this as 131st Street. Is that in front of Ingram Terrace? I'm not sure which one. Thank you. We need to give those people some relief, like
Yeah.
seriously. And I look forward to finding out on 132nd what that issue is over there, because that area, it's been fixed several times, but it's been flooding since I was a child.
Yes.
And yeah,
Mhm.
and they fix it and right back again, it's right back flooding years later. So it has to be something that's deep that somebody's not seeing. So hopefully you all will find that so that that area could be relieved as well, because we're not in a flood zone. So
Yeah.
don't know.
We'll work with Carlos and all the other engineering staff to determine, what they think some of the issues are and make recommended strategies to adapt it and what to do. And sometimes it could be elevating a road, but you have to think about unintended consequences of that. If you elevate the road, then where is the water going to go? Onto the property. So you got to be careful. So we have to look at some storm drain systems, maybe different swale or something like that, whatever we do. But we can come up with some concepts, and then we kind of leave it at that. And then your staff can take it and run with it and fully develop it if need be.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Commissioner Santiago.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, for that great opportunity to say what I feel. Future bringing a resolution to see if we can change the name of the city and add it Opa-locka Lake City. Because flow we have it all over our city. What is the cause that flow? We don't know. That's what we say. But more of the resident and people here, we know how that flow is coming, to be growing and growing every year that pass. I think it's a very good idea to have all these projects for the future and found out what is the really situation that we have here in the great city of Opa-locka. And now we're gonna talking only up to a particular area from the city, but I can see in the last 3 days and be traveling all over the city, and I see flow everywhere. That one here, that picture, yes, I can talking about that road right there, because up to today we still have water there all over that neighborhood, and we have there a nice clean neighborhood when all these apartments and all that, but we still have that problem there, and we are the responsible, the government or this the city of Opa-locka for all this flow. Is you welcome to bring out some ideas and all that, to try to correct this situation, but I don't think this workshop is a place to talk, about all the problem that we have that creating that flood. In the future, we're gonna be talking to our city manager and all that, but I know we have a lot of problem with flood in Opa-locka.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not because we're not in a flood area. I pay insurance for my house from the problem that we have because it's flood. I get 2 feet in my house of water in my driveway anytime that we have 20 minutes continuous rain, heavy rain. That's me. The problem is everywhere everywhere here in the city. Oh, thank you, Vice.
Thank you. While Commissioner Bass, let the record reflect, she's joined us, get a chance to kind of look at the brochure and questions she may have. Let me ask a couple of questions that I have. I'm going to have to leave, but I want to try to get these in. When is all the data collection due? I know your final report is going to be sometime next April, you said, correct?
Yeah, that's the full report. Yeah.
So when is it you anticipate having all of um, the data collected in terms of putting together a report? What is that time? When is that deadline?
In the next month or two, according to the grant, we have to also have a stakeholders meeting. So we're working with Adelina to identify some stakeholders. We finished a draft tech memo on data collection. We have that report already. We've turned it in. We just need to bring that to the stakeholders and have them review it. And that's going to be most of the city staff, I think, working and reviewing that. And then once we get that feedback, we close that out. And so that should be within the next month or two. So on data collection.
Okay, and you mentioned your projections of how you do futuristically for flooding, rainfall, et cetera. What kind of analysis you use to come up with those projections? What do you look at, historical data or projections based on climate change, which is always a guesstimate, but
Yeah.
so what do you use to kind of come up with that analysis?
We use climate data, and we use typically it in lieu of a hydrological model, like an integrated coordinated ponding system model. Do you have ICPR? I don't know if you do, but we can use that. Anyway, we do what they call bathtub model. And we look at the climate data, which I can tell you the storms are becoming, as you can see, a lot heavier and a lot more frequent. So, and that's what the climate is showing us. So we take that climate data and we project it out all these years. And then we rasterize it. I know it's kind of a technical thing, rasterize that over the elevation data and that kind of thing. So we can see the low spots and where it's flooding and where it's standing and that kind of thing. So, and we do that for the 3 time frames as required by statute that we have to look at that. So what you're going to see is progression of now this is flooding and maybe it's flooding at 1 foot, but by 2050, it's going to be 3 feet. And by 2080, it's going to be 5 or 6 feet. So those are the kind of things that are going to be seen in the exposure analysis.
Is the hope, thank you for the answer, the hope regarding the CRS programs you mentioned about potentially helping you with lowering your flood insurance costs, et cetera. In your history or your experience, how much has that been really helpful in lowering costs? Because we're not in a flood zone as indicated, but our insurance, even for flood, is still high. So what has been your opinion? How much does it maybe possibly lower? 10%, 5%?
Well, it depends on the number of points you get. There's a book that says, okay, if you do this, you get an amount of points. So right now you're at the 10 and your goal is to get down to like a 3 or 4. And that the 3 or 4 gives you the greatest reduction. And you can get like 25, 15, 10%. It's depending on what level you are in the CRS system. By doing this vulnerability assessment, by integrating it into your local mitigation strategy, by involving the public, all those are points if you apply in that community rating system that you can get and reduce. So I would say initially you probably get about 10, 15, and the more you do, the more points you get. So.
Okay, and I'm quite sure staff and managers hearing that, because that's something that does impact folks in their own pocketbook.
Yeah.
When you talk about flood insurance and the cost of that. The other question that I wanted to ask you, when you talked about the potential projects, and some of them you mentioned about regrading streets, and of course we've seen in some of our areas where we've elevated, well, not necessarily the city, but it's been elevated in some of the areas, and the water's come down onto the residential. And I always think 151st as being a prime example. Are we utilizing, I guess maybe it's a question of staff more so than to you, are we utilizing the concept in any of our current paving and sidewalk projects so that the water has somewhere to go? Are we putting any of these suggestions in place now for anything that we're doing with any of our roadways or sidewalk improvements in terms of preventing rain, ponding, whatever you want to call it?
So yes, good afternoon, commissioners. Adelina Gross, CIP manager. Yes, we are using the concepts of the elevation and to where to redirect the water that is ponding currently to a certain extent, because we have already some issues like 27th Avenue and Lejeune, and as you mentioned, 151st that are not owned by the city, but that would, the city will need to do improvements in the local roadways so we can either elevate the street and add the additional drainage that is needed, because most of the flooding, it accumulates because the roadway is higher on one side and then the flow goes down. So yes.
Okay, I bring that because you do see that in some of the areas, and that is an example. But since we're doing improvements, I was wondering how much we're utilizing it. I do see it sometimes with the stuff we've done on Purvis. I don't know how much it's helping because you already got a sidewalk. But some of the areas that are mentioned in these pictures, Mary Alice Brown, Ingram Terrace, although inside there is really private property, that's really county issue also. Have we utilized that in any of those?
So for Ingram Terrace, we are currently doing the design for that section. We are currently doing the roadway and the drainage design for that area, as well as some utility improvements. So that's being incorporated. There are some additional design and some improvements that will need to be completed by the county into that property, because even this week when we went out to see how the flooding was affecting the area, yes, the street was flooded because there is not existing drainage and whatever it is not working properly. But the property inside was even worse than the street.
No, I understand, but I'm saying that is a county challenge. So while we're doing what we're doing, I hope we are.
Yes, we are doing surveys, we are doing elevations, so we are doing modeling. And the new statute requires, the new FDP regulations requires that we prepare all the drainage for 25 years rain. Now, before was 10 years, so now we are preparing for 25.
No, I understand that. I'm just talking about particularly that area because it's so much of a challenge. And then have we identified as a city other areas that may not be a part? I mean, some of these are obviously we know about, but other areas that are prone to flooding, we've already identified to share with.
Yes, we have identified several areas that we just added some few pictures for visual impact, basically. But yes, we have identified a lot of areas of the city that
I'm only bringing that because I wanted to be sure that it's not just these areas.
No, it's
As
not
mentioned,
just
we
these
got a lot of different areas with all their challenges. But a part of what has to occur is this grant that we're doing and gathering the data. And then that allows us also to seek additional funding because now we got the data. That's the main part of it. And one caveat that one thing I know we've done it here in the city is not I'm not a fan of it, and I wanted to ask Ms. Quigley how they see it, maybe in other areas they've done, and that's the whole French drain system. I'm not a fan of that at all. You know that, and that seems to be what we are using a lot. And in my opinion, it just is not the best solution. That's just my opinion. And I've shared that with. So I'm interested to see when you all come and present your final report, what it looks like and what your recommendation and or suggestions are going to do or be to kind of mitigate or suggest to us what we're going to do as a part of mitigating some of our flooding. Is it proposed to put this report, it's going to be next April when you get the final one. I would hope it's the plan of the administration to include this somewhat in our 5-year capital improvement plan and any other long-term.
Yes.
Because I know it's small bites. You can't do it all at one time unless you get some major grant money. But I hope that's a part of how we're going to propose and do it so we can address some of these. And if grants come up or under funding opportunities, we can definitely add that into it. The last question I have before I reach to Commissioner Bass for her comments and the others. You mentioned about resource for private properties because this does not cover private properties. And you mentioned a couple of possible avenues. Could you go over those again just briefly or name them and make sure the manager's office get it so she can, because a lot of times some of the properties and flooding challenges, while we deal with the streets, some of them are on private properties, et cetera. And we need to be able to at least point them in the right direction or assist them how they can get help for flooding in those areas. Could you mention those again?
Yeah, I will, but I can get you a full list because I know the Elevate Florida is the most recent one, and that provides funding for homeowners to elevate their homes. That's a state program, and it's a new one. And they just closed the application cycle in April, and hopefully they will have it again next April. So I can send the information to Adelina and share with her, as well as, and I've forgotten what the wind and storm damage one is for the wind proofing. They do have funds available for if you have wind damage on your house and do some of your roofs, repair some of your roofs. They also had a business guide for resilience and flooding and how to do that too. And we can share you with some of that and some of the resources that we've been looking. We've been talking. I'm doing another study with Tampa right now, and SBA loans and Chamber of Commerce does some funding and things like that. That's more that's locally raised as well as statewide funds that might be available. With SBA, it tends to be loans, and I don't think a lot of the businesses like that. So, but I will send you the guidebook that the state has put together on that. We just been working on that. And I do want to encourage you too, if you do have existing flooding, the Resilient Florida application cycle grant application cycle is opening July 1 and it will be open till September 1. This is the same way you got this grant to do this planning study. They have what they call implementation grants, which are capital grants. And if you can show flooding now and that you're doing a VA right now in the process, you may be able to get some funding for some immediate projects to look at. If you have some ideas already for stormwater and things like that, submit those
Bye.
this year.
Okay, thank you for that information, Commissioner Bass, and then Commissioner Santiago. I'm going to have to leave, but I'll turn it over to, I guess, Commissioner Bass, because she's senior, to take over the meeting. I have to leave. But thank you for the information. I look forward to getting the others.
Thank you.
So Commissioner Bass will take them here, and then Mr. Santiago has some.
Very
Thank you.
nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Pardon my tardiness. I was exhausted. I actually fell asleep. But we have been, and I'm late, so I don't want to say too much because I might be saying what you guys have already gone over. But I just want to say, I know we have been battling this issue of flooding in the city of Opa-locka for as long as I can remember. And finally, we are at a place where we are making headway, one bite of the apple at a time. And I am anticipating the end of this whole process. I know it's going to take years, but sooner than later. There's still some good stories within the flooding zone. I shared with the city manager today, I don't know if she mentioned it, where one of my colleagues at my other job was upset because she saw something on Facebook about the flooding in Glorietta Apartments. So she was upset. She was like, that's not true. She was back there and there was no flooding. And for us, that's a major, because when it rains, it floods back there, and it didn't this time. So we're making a little baby steps. So we're looking forward to completing this journey with you and to see what's going to happen.
Great. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's what this program is for. So,
If anyone, the mic's open
yeah.
for anyone who'd like to speak.
Thank you, Commissioner Bass. That's gonna be like maybe the last question or the last point that I have.
should I
If
hold?
I say a little thing about Glorieta, okay, that's an apartment complex that they are doing a very good job out there, private companies. Okay, and I think that they resort a lot of the issue that they had before. I don't see that video. I don't know if it's from now or from the past, but I know now they have a very good system there now for draining the water, not like before, because they do a very good job there to renovating all this apartment. But this is not the main problem that we have right now. I think that I heard Marilyn, Adelina, yeah, she mentioning something about from and the reason that I want to say that is because I have here the owner of that business that I believe the lady mentioned it before for one of our areas here. Okay, that he have a big issue out there for years. Okay, and let me tell you this: you mentioning that we have a lot of improve in 27th Avenue and Legume.
No.
Legume.
What I mentioned was that the roads have been elevated by the county, either or the state.
Yeah.
So that's causing major flooding on the side streets. So
Okay.
that was what I was explaining to Commissioner Vice Mayor Kelly earlier.
Okay, yeah, no, I want to hear it from you because I want to be clear, what are we talking about? Because that's a big situation up there.
Mhm.
And the city, in most of the time, they know, and we know what is the situation, okay, about that area they are flooding, because that road there is not belong to us, it belong to the state, Legume Road. And they probably building, the road high, so high that now the water that we have cannot go in, flowing through that. Now, also, to like that we know, Madam Manager, okay, the situation that we have here in the city, we have a lot of restriction from Dade County, okay, for draining the water, raining water, raining water, that's what we call it when raining, okay, yeah. Other city, they have access to go and drain into the canals.
Actually, no, that's forbidden.
Well, I heard something different from the I think from the public work director, but let's not bring that point. But the thing is, we have so many restriction, okay, from Dade County to that I'm not made or allowed to do things that we're supposed to do here to protecting the resident and business people from here from Opa-locka. One of that one is we cannot use no emergency pump, okay, to drop off the water to the other side or whatever it is. That I'm going to be very soon talking to the county about that. And the other point that I say, we don't have no access to any other way, okay, to draining our water, our raining water.
So we can use, Commissioner Santiago, we can use emergency pumps. However, they have to be discharged at a certain place. In this case would be Black Point, that is the closest one to the city. And that's far away from the city, is not like 2 miles away, and also has a cost for discharging. So emergency pumps, in case of emergency situations, extreme situations, they are allowed, but the discharging point has to be one that is allowed by the county or DEP. Because those areas have to be identified. The issue is that you cannot flood into the canal. You cannot pump water into the canal, because that's going to flood the canal, and that's going to elevate the water and affect either Biscayne or the businesses adjacent to the canal, or the areas adjacent to the canal. So that's going to elevate the canal. So, and that will be a fine that the city will have to pay to the state and to the county if we go
yeah,
that route.
I think we want to ending, as soon as we can this workshop. Let me tell you, I don't say to pumping water when pumps to the canal. I say the drainings that we have in the city, we don't have no way to sending that water out of the city like other city, because they told me that other cities have access to build the raining in the road, and that water going somewhere else, okay, like to the canals that the state or the county have, and they have the system that they're releasing the water, closing the door, and they explaining to me. That's my point, okay. That's what they told me. The Opa-locka is not allowed to build anything that going through the canals. Now I'm talking about emergency pump. And thank you that you mentioning that about the emergency pump. Let me tell you this, okay? And if I can mention it, the name, Madam Manager and Mike Cali, okay? We have here the owner of that corner right there, Legume and 134th Street. Okay, one of the most
134th Street.
wonderful places that we have here to go with the family they need. Okay, it's Romo. Romo Place, they call it now. Okay, and let me tell you, the other day everybody had to get out of there as soon as they can because the water coming into, to the restaurant, and he had to close it. And I calling that an emergency. I call it an emergency, Madam Mayor. That's an emergency, and we cannot send in to that place a pump because county provided to us. Thank you.
Ms. Gross,
Hello.
can you elaborate, please? Thank you. I was going to ask her to do so.
So we have done improvements on 137th Street. I think Mr. Aloy, which is joining us here today, We have spoken to him and we have explained the situation. What's happening on 133rd? Yes, we do still have to do additional improvements in the area, and it's a funding issue, and we are trying to focus that to the future, as well as we are doing sewer lines right now, and we are doing the pump station in that area as well. The issue with 133rd is Lejeune Road is higher or elevated in comparison to Northwest 133rd. So the water is coming from the DOT road and getting into that corner. However, the improvements that were completed, I think is 2.5 years ago, there have been major relief for that area. I won't say it doesn't flood, because it does. When we have major raining events within the city or in the county, it does flood. However, 2, 3 hours, 4 hours later, as the system gets to work, we can go and see that the water has drained down and the situation has been relieved. We are working with the state right now. I think Mr. Austin is in communication with them so we can make the additional improvements that are needed on Lejeune. And the city will be then completing the improvements that are needed on 133rd.
I'm happy with that. I'm okay.
Okay.
For now, yes.
Now, let me ask a quick question. Where are we on the agenda?
We are right now to closing the
Discussion items. We were,
discussion.
yeah, we were at the end.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
So that was the last discussion.
yeah.
Okay, let me just say this before, if everybody's okay. Any more questions? Okay. Let me just say this before we adjourn. I think we all know that this is a major I'm trying to find the word to describe it. Task that we're taking on with our water. And we have to be reminded that this is not a one person or one entity issue to fix. It's going to take all of the little pieces to make sure that this happens. So I'm not going to sit here and beat my city up or my departments up or whatever, because I know that it's just not us. We need funding. We need this, the county. All of us have to get in this for this to happen. So like I said, I'm not going to beat anybody up. I know it's going to take time. We're only a little piece of the puzzle for this to happen. So I would encourage you all to continue to work as hard as you can to make this happen. Keeping in the back of my mind that I know it's going to take time, but I would still like for us to, like we've always been doing, point out the areas that have the most need and work from there. So at least we can start to, I hate to use the word put a Band-Aid, but at least a little bit of cushion on some of the areas as we move forward. And hopefully, prayerfully, I don't know, 5, 10 years from now, we won't have this conversation, that everything will be taken care of. So with that being said, motion to adjourn?
Move it.
Before you adjourn,
Mhm.
Commissioner Bass, we would like to let you know what the next steps will be for this program.
Okay.
So they are doing the collection data for the program right now.
Mhm.
That will be complete. The second workshop will be in October 2025. We will be setting a date for that. Also, all this information will be available on the city website, and the comment cards and input from the public that will be also available after this session. So people can still interact
Mhm.
after we finish this project. No, after we finish the workshop, because the project is gonna be finished by April 2026
Okay.
and adopted by the city. Once we have that, we will be able to ask for grant funding from the state and from the county as well to make some improvements in the most critical areas for the city. I just want to mention as well that for Mary Alice Brown, 132nd Street, we are presenting, can I go ahead? We are presenting an item next week for improvements in that area that will include planning, design, and solution for that, for the flooding.
Perfect.
And not only for that street, but for the whole section on that area from 27th to 30th, including 28th Avenue. Because it's a major issue for the city, we do know that there is drainage installed in that section. However, it's not working properly. So we are going to be presenting that item next week, so we can start with the design and planning for that section.
Another bite of the apple. That's what I call it. Another bite. Let me ask one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any way that the residents, when they see flooding areas, that they can report it?
Yes, there is actually a link on our website
Mhm.
that you can report, and I think the city has an app as well that can be utilized to report flooding or any other concerns that the resident may have.
As it relates to infrastructure? Or-
Yes.
Okay.
It could be sewer, it could be water lines, flooding issues, a pothole. They can do that.
Perfecto.
And we have to be very careful. Don't get out when you see flow in front of your house because you never know what is under the water. That's what I learned today in the hurricane thing that we have. Yeah, it can be maybe a electrical cable.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that's it.
Yeah,
Anybody else?
now I'm satisfied when the answer that you giving to us. Okay, because you're mentioning something. If we don't, we're not only talking about a particular corner or a particular place out there. We're talking about the entire area
Yeah.
out there. Okay, it's a big, mess with the floor, the whole area in
Yeah.
that side.
We are aware of the issues of 133rd and 43rd Avenue and the loop on that section. So yes, we are trying to get funding and work around to see what improvements can be done.
All right, I move it already.
If I may really quickly, you talked about businesses and being able to apply for certain grants and stuff that may help them with flooding and stuff that they may have. If we can get this information to two of our businesses immediately, Chavez Market
Oh, yeah.
and I always get the name confused. The other, a grocery store on 20, where the old Winn-Dixie used to be, a Price Choice.
Right choice.
If we can get that information to them so that they'll know, because at some point we're going to have to put our foot down and force them to do what needs to be done on their property to alleviate the swimming pool that comes in, because they have drains, but they're obviously not working. Something's not right with them.
And sometimes it's properly maintenance. Once we have the information from Ms. Quickly, we will be sharing all that information on our website as well.
Okay, but I'm asking just a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
If we can
Special.
deliver them the applications, because those two properties have been going on for years as well. Because at some point we're gonna have to force them to do what needs to be done. Because you can't be in our city making money and not trying to fix your property.
We'll make sure they get the information.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin. You are absolutely right. It is a swimming pool when it rains. Yeah, right. You're absolutely right. You're good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, motion to adjourn.
Oh, there are refreshments.
Oh,
God, I'm sorry. There are refreshments on the back.
Say that again?
There are refreshments on the back.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
move it.
Adjourn.
The hammer. Ay, 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 ay.